This video is probably the last video that you're going to watch for the topic of letter of recommendations, because in this video I'll tell you what are the best things that you have to do in your letter of recommendation. How do you write the letter of recommendation? What all to include? What all to not include? I mean, there are things that people include and I'm always like, why are you doing it? So this is probably the last video. All I want you to do is take a pen and paper. I know you will find all these things very important, but you will forget all these things. So just write all these things. It is very important. And yeah, hitting the subscribe button is important if you feel like this video was useful. Without further ado, let's directly talk about the exact things that you need to do in your letter of recommendation. First major mistake, do not take a letter of recommendation from your principal. Do not take a letter of recommendation from your dean. Your principal has 5,000, 4,000, at least 1,000 students that one principal is managing. Same goes for the dean. There are so many students. That dean or principal does not know you well enough. Trust me, they don't know you well enough. If they do, amazing. But majority of the times, they don't know you enough. Who do you take a letter of recommendation from? Anyone who knows you. That can also be an assistant professor. Does not really need to be a professor also. Assistant professor who knows you very well can write about you is way more important than the dean, principal or something like that, because they probably don't know you enough. Same goes with the CEO of the company. A CEO would not write a letter of recommendation for the intern. A CEO is not in contact with the intern on a daily basis, right? So does it make sense for a CEO to write a letter of recommendation for an intern? There are like 4 or 5 levels in between. Why are those people not writing a letter of recommendation? Why is CEO directly writing a letter of recommendation? So first major mistake, don't take letter of recommendation from the highest authority. Take it from the person who knows you best. Second, it should not be a general letter of recommendation. What do I mean by a general letter of recommendation? Professor should stop mentioning that you're hardworking, smart, intelligent. All those things are replaceable. What do I mean by replaceable? If I change the name from XYZ to Murad, applicable for Murad also. If I change from Murad to ABC, applicable for ABC. If I change the name, it is applicable for everyone. That shouldn't be a letter of recommendation. Letter of recommendation should be specific, mentioning that these are the things that this person did. This is what he did in the class. This is exactly what he said in the class. If you mention anecdotes, nothing is better than that. You don't even need to mention that you're hardworking. You don't need to mention any of the adjectives. You need to mention cases. You need to mention things that happened, examples that happened. You need to mention exactly these things. Stop mentioning that you're hardworking, amazing, never seen some person like this. All of that is bullshit. Stop using superlative words because those are replaceable. And this is usually what happens in India. A professor has a template and he just changes the name A, B, C, D, and they just keep on changing the name. That is not a letter of recommendation. That's the worst thing that you can be doing. If it does not mention your personal anecdotes, it is of no use. Third, a short LOR. Let's suppose the person who is writing your LOR does not write enough about you. Fourth thing is, in India, I have hardly seen professors writing letter of recommendations on their own. It is majority of the times students that give information about themselves, 4 or 5 lines or 4 or 5 things, and say that you can write a letter of recommendation and mention these points. Now, what are these 4 to 5 things that you should tell your professor to write about? Very important. So let's now talk about what to write in the letter of recommendation. First major thing that you have to mention. I have seen no one talk about this. Like literally no one talks about this. I don't know why. Very important. If you're applying to any top university, most important thing. If anything is missing in your profile, that is what the professor should be writing about. What do I mean by that? Let's think about it. Suppose your semester 3 went wrong. Probably your grades flunked, or you flunked a paper or something. One thing or the other happened. Or probably you were not a part of any society. Or probably you were having low grades. Anything that happened in college. The professor should explain that. How does a professor explain that? Let's suppose you have good grades in every subject. You're going for an economics degree, but your microeconomics grades are bad. You want to go for an economics degree, but your microeconomics grades are C. That's like a bad grade. A C grade is a bad grade. 6 GPA in economics is bad and you're planning to go for economics. What should the professor do? The professor should mention it that, oh, he scored so well in microeconomics. No one else scored this well. Now, when the person is reading this letter of recommendation, he looks at your transcript, sees a C or a 6th grade, and then here he sees, oh, he scored the highest. So the admissions director directly thinks that, okay, 6 in microeconomics is actually a good grade. And probably it isn't. But since the professor is writing it, then that means it is. So that is how you use the credibility of professor. Any subject that you did not do well, in fact, let's suppose you barely managed to pass. Even that we can write in a very glorious way. What we can write is, he was struggling a lot in the beginning because he was not clear with the concepts. But then He sat with me, he took extra classes, he did X thing, Y thing, and at the end of the day, he ended up getting a 5 GPA in this class, which was very hard for him. But I have full faith in him that if he works more on it, he will be the best person at it. I mean, wow. A 5 GPA, which is not even explainable to a top university, all of a sudden feels like an achievement. Think about it. That's how you use the credibility of your professor. Second, very controversial opinion, but I believe in it. Ask your professor to also write about the negatives. Think about it. In the context of full disclosure, I have asked my recommenders to write negative things about me, and I have exactly asked them what to write. So in my letter of recommendation, my recommender has written all the positive things, but there is a paragraph, entire paragraph about the negatives. So let me talk about it. Despite his strengths, Murad sometimes also faces challenges in balancing some of his commitments. Yes, my recommender actually wrote that he faces issues with balancing commitments. Let's read the next line. His involvement in diverse projects, from FinLadder to a personal YouTube channel to Get Unibound to student advising, university branding, Instagram page, another Instagram page, another FinLadder Instagram page, FinLadder YouTube channel, and his dad's business. All of this sometimes spreads his focus thin. Yes, he did write about all of this. He did write that I sometimes spread myself too thin. And finally, he ends this paragraph by saying enhancing his strategic planning could lead to even more significant achievements for Murad. Yes, he did write all of those things. Why? Because that's the reality. And I want the university that I'm going to join to know that this is something I'm facing an issue with. I've already mentioned this somewhere in the essay that I'm working on this, and my recommender is also pointing this out. And this is the reality. This is something I'm actually facing. And this adds loads of credibility to my letter of recommendation. The recommendation should be honest. If you feel like there is something missing in you, you should make sure that the university knows, because the more the university knows about your flaws as well, the better it always is. Because the more honest you are with the university, better are your chances of getting an admission. It is all about honesty. It is all about showing the true self on paper. True self. You don't have to fake it. They have been giving admissions since past 40 years. They know everything. And when they see a letter of recommendation only superlative words, they know that it is a fake letter of recommendation. But when they see an honest letter of recommendation, things that you are working on, if they see all of those things, that is the best brownie point that you can get. It's like 2 points to Gryffindor. Yes, so be honest. That's my opinion. But yeah, that's controversial. Third thing is, whatever you're writing, give an example to it. What do I mean by that? Don't write that you're a hard worker. Give me a story where you explain that you're a hard worker. Don't write the word that I'm a hard worker. Don't write the word that the student is a hard worker. No. Give me a story explaining why do you think the student is hard worker. Let's suppose you have integrity. Give me a story explaining why do you have integrity. So every word, every superlative thing that you want to mention should be explained by a story that is only for you. True story that is by you, for you. It shouldn't be a thing that can be written for someone else. Suppose Murad did FRM, that's only for Murad. So when Murad was studying HRM classes with me, human resource management classes with me, he was also doing FRM and he still managed to get this grade. So this is true for only Murad. So make sure the example is yours. Now let's write the letter of recommendation. Finally, let's draft a letter of recommendation. First point is greetings. You write greetings to whomsoever it may concern, dear, to whomsoever it may concern. Second paragraph is the opening where the professor mentions who he is, who she is, why are they credible enough to give this letter of recommendation. So they can mention that I am Professor KK Khurana, XYZ, blah, blah, blah. They mention that, and I've been working since this year. These are the number of students that I've taught, and this is my relationship with this person. Very important. You have to explain the relationship. Let's suppose you're taking a letter of recommendation from your boss. You have to exactly explain the relationship. What kind of reporting did they used to do? Exactly. The more specific that you are, the more understanding the admission committee will have of who is writing the letter of recommendation and why. So please make sure that your letter of recommendation is screaming that who is writing the letter of recommendation and why and in what capacity. Next, you start mentioning the qualities. But all the qualities, you don't write the quality name. You don't write hardworking, team player, nothing like that. You give examples that this person was working on this project and this is what he did. This person was doing this thing and this is what he did. This person was struggling with this subject and this is what he did. So examples are the best way to write a letter of recommendation. That makes the admission committee know that okay, this professor actually knows about the student, rather than just writing all the superlative adjectives. I don't know why people write those. That's like the worst thing that you can do in your letter of recommendation. Next point, one more very important point is, if let's suppose you know the course and you know the professor from that course, so now your professor can write that the professor that this person has. Next, very important point, no one will say this to you, but listen to this very carefully. Let's suppose you want to go for political science or anything. There is a professor that you know is going to teach in your class. Okay, listen to this very carefully. This is a very important point. So you know that you want to go to, let's suppose, Stanford, and in Stanford this professor is going to teach you, and you're from Delhi University. You already know that this Stanford professor has written research papers. Check which research paper this person has written. Now your Delhi University professor is saying that, oh, and also the person in Stanford who is writing this research paper, Murad has already worked on such a thing with me. We have done a research together. If for a second your Delhi University professor says that whatever your Stanford professor is doing, Murad is also working on the same thing, think about the credibility increase. I mean, think about it. The university or Delhi University professor is so involved in your thing that he exactly knows what your future plans are, and he exactly knows why this university will be the best fit for you. So if your Delhi University professor mentions why this university will be the best fit for you, nothing stops you from getting the admission. Like, this is 10 extra points to Gryffindor. 10 points. Then you clearly state that I am recommending Murad for this course. I highly recommend. This line you have to mention, that I am recommending. That is why I am recommending Murad for your course. Very important. And finally, you have to mention who wrote the letter of recommendation. So basically your name, your designation, and how do you reach out to me. Yes. Some universities reach out to your professor after they have submitted the letter of recommendation also. So very important how they reach out to me. So that is how you write a letter of recommendation. If you enjoyed this video and this video gets 500 likes, we're going to make one more video about how to write an essay, which would be here. And one more important video is this one. How do you apply to a university with low grades? But yeah, please let me know in the comment section what you thought about this video. Very important for me to know whether I should keep on creating such content or not.